They used to call this island the Paris of the East, mostly because it had beautiful buildings with large gardens and impressive stone archways. But now, it's nothing like it used to be, with all the architecture almost entirely covered in tree roots and vines. Ross Island is a small territory in the Indian Ocean. It's located east of the Indian city of Port Blair. Though initially thought of as a jail, Ross Island eventually became a luxurious resort for the local administrators. They called this island a real treat for its more privileged residents. It boasted opulent bungalows, stained glass window panels brought all the way from Italy, neatly kept gardens, tennis courts, and even swimming pools. Soon after the complex was closed in 1937, a powerful earthquake hit the island. It caused a lot of damage, making it even more uninhabitable. The island is now in the administration of India and has become a tourist attraction for people interested in abandoned towns. Pieces of German architecture still lie hidden in the Namibian desert. The city of Kolmanskop, Namibia, was a luxury location at its peak in the early 1900s when German workers settled here looking for diamonds. This abandoned town used to have everything from a ballroom to a hospital and even a bowling alley. It all started to decline somewhere in the late 1910s when another diamond-packed location was found nearby. So, most of the people living here moved, leaving everything behind in search of more money. Kolmanskop has since been slowly occupied by sand dunes, while the hot temperature and low moisture help to preserve the buildings. This ghost town is also available for visitors. If it sounds interesting, you can book a tour in the nearby town of Lüderitz. Another abandoned castle dominates the view in Krakow, a city in Italy. The whole village sits atop a cliff that's 1,312 feet high. The founders liked this location since they knew it would be easy to defend themselves from unwanted guests. But the castle, built in the 1300s, soon became overwhelmed by landslides and earthquakes. Even though it has no residents anymore, the medieval city often comes alive during the various local festivals that take place here in the summer months. The locals also offer tours and tell amazing stories about the location. One of the highlights of the tour is a statue that seemingly came out of nowhere and now lies in a body of water. Hidden away in the Montana mountains, Garnet Ghost Town tells the well-known American story of the West's gold rush. The town's history goes back to the 1890s, when they found a lot of gold in the Nancy Hanks mine. During its glory days, Garnet had almost 1,000 residents. Even though it's in a relatively secluded location, it had saloons, hotels, stores, a school, and other features of a regular little town. In 1905, when most of the gold had already been taken away, most mines were left behind, so only a couple of hundred residents stayed in Garnet. The final straw came in 1912, when a fire damaged most of the town's buildings. So, by the 1940s, Garnet was completely abandoned. It soon became a hotspot for treasure hunters looking for furnishings and artifacts. That was until a preservation campaign started in the 1970s. It ended with the town being declared a historic district in 2010. To this day, Garnet is one of the best preserved ghost towns in the area. Hashima Island is another abandoned location that tells us that when people leave, nature takes over. This mysterious place was even featured in a James Bond movie because of its ghostly landscape. It used to be a well-known spot in Japan for undersea coal mines, as it was opened in 1881. In 1959, at its peak, there were over 5,000 people living here, including mine workers and their families. As soon as the mines started going dry, sometime in 1970, people started to slowly depart the island, leaving it completely abandoned in 3 months. Even though nobody lives there these days, there are a lot of tourists here that drop off to wander around the abandoned homes, swimming pools, stores, and factories. Another town that started with a mining company back in 1881 is Calico, California. People discovered the location was packed with silver, so it soon became home to over 500 silver mines and 3,000 residents. It used to feature hotels, general stores, restaurants, and a school. There was even a local newspaper printed here called the Calico Print. But by 1986, the town had become empty. One of the former locals decided to buy it and began its restoration, making it a registered historical landmark. It even has a museum of the Old West available for tourists. One of the most interesting attractions that were rebuilt is the 1-mile-long Calico and Odessa Railroad. It currently goes through the steep canyons and hills, and even passes the old mines and buildings north of Calico. Approximately 1/3 of the town is original, while the rest consists of newer buildings that are replicas meant to recreate the spirit of its past. If you're a fan of cars, you might have heard of Henry Ford as the famous American industrialist who founded the Ford Motor Company in 1903. But in 1927, he began working on another one of his ambitious dreams, Fordlandia. It was supposed to be a massive rubber plantation located near the Tapajos River in Brazil, since he needed a reliable source of rubber for his car tires and hoses. His vision was to design a town complete with swimming pools, a golf course, living bungalows, and even weekly square dancing sessions for the locals. This project was unfortunate to begin with, since the local rubber trees soon got infected with leaf fungus. Even though Henry Ford invested a staggering $20 million into this potential income source, the town failed to produce the needed rubber. He had nothing left to do but to sell it to Brazil in 1945, and soon it was completely abandoned. Many of its buildings are still standing, but have been taken over by the surrounding nature. You can still see curious tourists wandering through it to this day. During its glory days, Hampi was the second largest city in the world. Looking at its ruins today, it's hard to imagine this Indian city used to be filled with temples and bazaars, and that it served as an important center of the Mauryan Empire in the 14th and 15th centuries. It was destroyed in the 16th century, but it still has beautifully preserved forts and markets. It became part of the UNESCO World Heritage in 1986, aiming to protect its buildings, such as the Lotus Mahal, a stone structure that was carved to resemble a lotus flower opening to the sun. A tourist village was constructed back in 1920 along the shore of Epicuén, a salt lake about 370 miles southwest of Buenos Aires in Argentina. It was designed to provide people with a busy city life a breath of fresh air near the restorative salt waters of the nearby lake. It was soon equipped with a railroad station and ended up having a population of more than 5,000 residents. The project was also destined to fail soon enough, as the unusual amount of rain at that time caused Lake Epicuén to swell. In 1985, the water took over the local dam, and the town was flooded. The waters were so deep that they even reached a depth of 33 feet in 1993. They only began to recede in 2009 and left behind the remaining buildings, literally encrusted in salt. No one came back to the town except for Pablo Novak, who returned here back in 2012 and was the only resident of Villa Epicuén at the time.
When you think of theme parks, you normally imagine laughter and fun times. But once they're closed and abandoned, now that's a whole different story. Let's take a look at some of them. You decide to take a trip to New Orleans to visit Six Flags. When you arrive there, you discover the theme park is deserted. The sign that says "Closed for Storm" is still standing. You're feeling adventurous, so you let yourself pass the crackling gates. Is it chilly in here, or is it just me? You walk past a swimming pool, and it looks like there's someone in there. You get closer, and oh no, it's an alligator. Better run and leave that thing alone. You keep exploring the sign. The park took inspiration from the city's French architecture, but today the buildings are dirty, the windows are all shattered, and there are unusual items everywhere. Say, what is this vintage rollerblade doing here? The park closed during the hurricane, and it was left standing under 7 feet of water. No wonder the metal rides are all rusty now. This carousel doesn't look too inviting to me. We'll have to come back another time. Hey, at least you got some cool-looking pictures, right? Let's make this next one even more exciting. Imagine you plan to visit Dede Park at night. Somewhere in the countryside of Belgium, you'll find a creepy theme park derelict from many years ago. You have nothing with you but the floodlight on your phone. You see the entrance of a bridge and start to make your way across. The bridge sways and creaks. Just FYI, you are crossing one of the longest hanging bridges in Europe. You made it through. Whew. The surrounding woods are terrifying, and several deserted attractions start popping up along the way. The forest has taken this twirling swing set. This huge slide would probably break if you tried to use it now. The park is in terrible condition. No wonder they closed it down due to security reasons. Best to leave it now and come back in the daylight. Your next stop is Wonderland Eurasia, also known as Anka Park in Turkey. The theme park opened in March 2019 but closed shortly after. Once inside the gigantic complex, you stumble upon what looks like an empty warehouse but ends up being an indoor roller coaster. Everything was left intact and is as good as new. You even take a quick sit on one of the roller coaster carts, perfectly lined up for the next ride. If you're feeling really adventurous, you can walk on the rails of the indoor coaster. Just be careful not to fall down. Oh, over there are the Flintstones. It's almost like a childhood deja vu here in the youngsters section of the park. On the horizon, you see what looks like the Jurassic World and decide to check it out. There are neglected statues of huge T-Rexes and fake skeletons of dinosaurs lying across the floor. Unlike the other derelict parks, everything here is new, which makes it all the more strange. Nara Dreamland was meant to be Japan's Disney World, but the project failed over time. Today, it's inhabited by moist ivies and strange birds. To get in, you'll pass a drawbridge and head into a pastel-colored castle. Your heart might beat faster than usual when you pass a fog-covered roller coaster. Was that meant to be the Matterhorn? Yup. Everything about this place says you shouldn't be there. Tossed on the park's floor, you'll see reels of tickets and misconfigured stuffed animals. How about walking into an empty diner? It's bizarre how the tables and stools are still in place. Strolling through what was once a gift shop, you'll see empty shelves and an old-school cash machine. I'd say you better leave before anything comes out of here. Now, if I say Joyland, what do you imagine? The name says it all, right? But if you decide to visit Joyland today, I bet you'll have a very chilling time. Down in Wichita, Kansas, you'll find a once famous but now empty theme park filled with eerie sights. A pale blue slide in the middle of a forest? Check. Empty warehouses straight out of a horror movie? Check. A wacky shack that looks truly wacky? You bet. But if you visit it on a good sunny day, I'd say the park is weird but still has some beauty. Joyland was built in the late 1940s. It carries a vintage aura that goes well with the neglected atmosphere. Hey, look at this rusty yellow Ferris wheel with a stripped ticket box in front. I dare say it's almost charming. The Magic Harbor Amusement Park is not that magical after all. Just outside of Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, you'll find an old theme park left to nature. Here, bumper cars are not bumping anymore. If you get into a hedge maze, you'll probably never find your way out of it. I'm not sure what you'll see running around amongst the rusty rides, so good luck if you're planning a visit. If you're looking for somewhere to cool down on a hot and sunny afternoon, how about Disney's River Country? Just kidding. You're definitely not going to want to get in the water there. The park was built in the 1970s and closed in 2001. Pay a visit to the Whitewater Rapids on foot instead of floating down the fake river. You'll have about 330 feet to stroll along a very bumpy pathway. Maybe you'll see hanging tires that served as swing sets out in the bay. You can even try zip lining if you trust the cable. To add a little more creepy to this story, the park was closed down due to a dangerous bacteria that thrived in warm bodies of water. Are you sure you don't fancy a swim? When you think Italy, I bet you think pasta and pizza. and a leaning tower somewhere. Well, in the south of Italy sits the empty Miragica amusement park. The entrance still says welcome, but people stopped coming a few years ago. The site is covered in grass everywhere. The toy-like architecture is still there. Beneath the forgotten rails of an open-air roller coaster, you can almost hear the screams of excitement of people on the ride. This part of the park is usually prohibited, but there's no one around to control that now. It might be scary to be here, but adrenaline sure is running high. This next theme park is vacant only during a certain time of the year, but it still gives the true heebie-jeebie vibes. You have to catch a train from the city and travel to the end of the line till you reach the park. Coney Island is a seasonal park, open only from the middle of spring to the middle of fall. If you want to catch its unnerving vibe, you have to visit in winter. Then, you'd walk through the rows of empty stalls with the fairy string lights still hanging above your head. It looks frozen in time as all the rides lay shut down. Speaking of which, sometimes it gets frozen for real. Under many inches of snow, Coney Island is a little less disturbing. Then again, snow does have that effect on landscapes, but the park is empty and deserted nonetheless. I bet it's a great photo op. Now, be sure to tell me in the comments which abandoned amusement park you found the creepiest. Hey, you know me, I won't be checking any of these out. I'll let you go first.
I bet you've heard of the infamous Bermuda Triangle. However, there is a lesser-known sibling that could be even more unsettling than its counterpart. The Bridgewater Triangle, located in Massachusetts, is a small but intense hotspot of paranormal activity. Cryptozoologist Lauren Coleman coined the term back in 1983 to describe this 200-square-mile area that encompasses eerie points in Abington, Rehoboth, and Freetown. Within its borders lie numerous towns, including Bridgewater, from which it draws its name. For those brave enough to explore, there is even a guidebook available detailing the creepiest sites within the region. You can start your trip with King Philip's Cave in Norton. Legend has it that Wampanoag leader Metacomet, aka King Philip, used to hang out there during his epic rebellion against the British in the 1600s. And now, some brave souls swear they've seen ghostly lights and heard phantom drums in the cave. But if ghost hunting isn't your thing, how about checking out the Hockomock Swamp in the Bridgewater Triangle? People claim to have spotted everything from Bigfoot to giant birds and snakes around the lake. And there are also rumors of phantom fires and ghostly lights to keep you on your toes. It's like a paranormal party out there. And if you prefer real-life creepy tales, you've got to swing by the Solitude Stone in Bridgewater. Tucked away by the Nunkatesset River, this stone carries a haunting story dating back to the 1800s. A local minister carved a mysterious poem on it, and over the years, it's become a hotspot for ghost hunters and history buffs alike. Located in Australia, the Monte Cristo homestead may appear as a charming Aussie home from the outside, but looks can be deceiving. Behind its closed doors lies a sinister story that has led to its reputation as the most haunted house in Australia. It was originally owned by Christopher Crawley, who made his fortune with the Railway Hotel in Junee. Dark events occurred within the walls of the Monte Cristo homestead. The Crawley family resided in the late Victorian-style mansion perched atop a hill overlooking the town. Tragedy struck with the demise of Christopher in 1910 and his wife Elizabeth in 1933. Upon the family's departure in 1948, the house fell into disrepair and was left abandoned. The Ryan family later purchased the homestead and worked to restore it, only to discover they were not alone. Strange occurrences such as unusual animal behavior and encounters with mysterious lights and ghostly figures prompted the Ryans to believe the house was haunted. Legend has it that at least 10 spirits roam the halls of Monte Cristo homestead. You can choose from a variety of ghosts at the haunted house: a young kid who was dropped by a nurse down the stairs, a maid who plummeted from a balcony, or a stable boy who tragically passed away in a fire. The most active spirit is the caretaker's son, who was discovered chained next to his deceased mother and remained chained for 4 decades. As of now, the house functions as a bed and breakfast, providing dinner and a ghost tour detailing its dark history. Braver guests have the option to stay overnight in the eerie residence. Located in the quaint town of St. Francisville near New Orleans, Myrtle's Plantation is a historic mansion with a 125-foot veranda and a grand foyer adorned with a magnificent French crystal chandelier. The mansion has a dark past, with 10 people having lost their lives within its walls. As a result, there have been numerous reports of ghost sightings, including the infamous Chloe, a spectral figure wearing a distinctive green turban that haunts visitors in their rooms. Other reported ghosts include a young girl peering through a window, a kid bouncing on beds, a soldier, a voodoo priestess, and the ghost of a previous owner. Despite its reputation as the most haunted house in America, Myrtle's Plantation, just like Monte Cristo Homestead, now operates as a charming bed and breakfast with 21 accommodations. Visitors can take ghost tours during the day or opt for more popular and spine-chilling evening tours. In addition, a restaurant on the property offers fresh, locally sourced cuisine to guests. Originally built in 1824, the Italian-style horseshoe-shaped opera house in San Juan, Puerto Rico has been a prominent fixture in the city's cultural landscape for over a century. Despite rumors of paranormal occurrences, Teatro Tapia is a must-see due to its distinctive architectural beauty. According to local legend, the theater is haunted by 2 ghostly figures. One is a woman in a red dress who appears in box 105 before disappearing, while the other is an actress who tragically fell on stage in the 1800s and is said to perform for invisible audiences before vanishing. They say her ghost wanders through the theater, occasionally singing on stage and causing doors to slam shut backstage. Although these ghostly tales cannot be confirmed, the theater's 200-year history leaves room for speculation. The Castle of Good Hope is the oldest building in South Africa, built between 1666 and 1679 by soldiers, sailors, and whatnot. The main purpose was to protect people living there. But apparently, it turns out to be a place that scares each and every person who visits it. You may say it's all just vivid imagination and there's nothing paranormal about this place, but here's the deal. Many people claim they heard voices and steps in the dungeon. Plus, the bell in the bell tower is said to ring sometimes. But it's not really possible for the bell to ring as the tower was bricked some centuries ago. There's a legend, though, that explains the eerie ringing. They say a soldier settled scores with life there, and it must be his ghost ringing. But wait, it gets even spookier. There's a ghostly black dog that likes to scare people, a tall glowing man who jumps off walls, and even a lady from the 18th century who still plays host to important guests. Today, the castle is a military museum and a spot for traditional ceremonies. The place is full of untold secrets waiting to be uncovered. Known as the Giant of Loire Valley, this French castle is seriously impressive. It has 7 floors, 204 rooms, loads of portrait galleries, and even its own opera house that fits 200 people. Originally built as a fortress back in the 11th century, it even got royal visits. But here's where things get really interesting. Apparently, the place is haunted by the Green Lady, aka La Dame Verte. She's said to be the love child of King Charles VII, and her story ended tragically in the 15th century when her husband did her in for cheating. People claim they've seen her ghostly figure in the chapel tower, decked out in her signature green dress with creepy, hollow eyes and a missing nose. Some even say they've heard her wailing throughout the castle. Now, this castle has been turned into a swanky hotel that throws cool events like markets. But if you're brave enough to spend a night there, the rooms there are lush. Step inside the ancient Ram Inn, a place where darkness lurks around every corner, and the spirits of the past never truly rest. Whispers echo through the halls, accompanied by the sound of distant footsteps and the unexplained feeling of icy fingers brushing against your skin. Shadows dance in the flickering candlelight, casting eerie shapes on the ancient walls, adorned with sinister symbols of a forgotten time. As you venture deeper into the inn, the temperature drops dramatically, sending a chill down your spine that no amount of layers can warm. The ghostly apparitions that roam the corridors are said to be lost souls seeking revenge, or simply unable to move on to the next realm. In the bishop's room, the most haunted of them all, the oppressive energy is suffocating, as if the very walls are closing in on you. But despite the overwhelming sense of fear and dread that permeates the inn, there are those who are drawn to its darkness like moths to a flame. They seek out the thrill of encountering the unknown and the rush of feeling the presence of the supernatural up close and personal. No matter what happens, don't stop! We almost got it! Two treasure seekers are digging frozen ground in a cornfield at night. It's raining hard, lightning is flashing, but these two guys keep working. And now the shovel hits something solid. No way! A treasure chest! They start digging faster and find a piece of a ship's engine. What the? Far from the seas and lakes, somewhere under the fields of Kansas City, they found a giant sunken ship. How is this possible? Now you'll see. Some people spend their lives searching for shipwrecks with treasures underground. One of them is explorer David Hawley. He's been looking for such ships far from the seas, rivers, and oceans for many years. He does this because he likes the feeling of adventure. The holds of these ships may contain chests of gold, antiques, and artifacts. And you can get a lot of money for them. David says you don't have to go into the ocean to find a sunken ship. They may be lying in your backyard. But why do ships end up buried underground among fields, farms, and plains? Let's find out using the example of steamboat Great White Arabia. According to old records, the newspaper clippings, this ship had been carrying about 200 tons of treasure before it sank in 1856. Many rumors and local legends said the ship was lying underground a few miles northeast of Kansas City. It was there because people deliberately altered the riverbed and channels of the Missouri River in the second half of the 19th century. They artificially brought the shores closer to each other. They narrowed the river to increase the flow's speed, so boats could sail much faster. In the 19th century, steamboats were the most popular means of transporting passengers and goods. Before railroads, they extended the western border across the Mississippi and Missouri rivers and brought supplies to people. That's why it was so important to increase the speed of their movement. So, on September 5, 1856, Arabia was sailing along such an estuary. It came across a snag sticking out of the water. A piece of log quickly flooded the ship. Fortunately, all passengers were evacuated. But the steamer and its precious cargo reached the silt bottom of the Missouri River in a few minutes. Several years had passed. Everyone forgot about the vessel. During this time, the course of the Missouri River had changed. But Arabia remained under the wet, muddy bottom. The soil level above it was getting higher, and the ground was losing moisture. Eventually, many decades later, a cornfield formed above the sunken ship. In the 1980s, one farmer owned this area, and he had no idea what was hidden in his territory. David Hawley carefully studied the history of the sunken ships of the USA. He knew that hundreds of steamers had gone underwater all over Missouri, but most of all, he was interested in Arabia, as there were rumors that it was filled with gold and other valuable things. The territory of cornfields in Kansas was vast, but David Hawley knew how to search properly. In 1987, he started working. First, together with his brother and father, they collected all the clippings from old newspapers they could find. They were looking not only for information about the steamer, but also for maps of the Missouri River. They tracked its historical changes, checked the dates, and identified a large area where the steamer sank. Next, they used electromagnetic testing and other geological stuff to study the soil and find the right place. They searched for differences in ground moisture and density. Then, they went through the territory with powerful metal detectors. And so, by the fall of 1988, they had determined the location of the steamer. Arabia was the size of a football field. This gigantic vessel lay 45 feet underground, 4 stories down. But before they started excavating, they had to ask the owner of the cornfield for permission. For the farmer, this news was a big surprise. He agreed on the condition that the excavations would be completed by spring so that he could sow a new crop. Digging a giant ship in winter is much more difficult and expensive than at other times. It includes additional equipment, electricity, and heating costs. The team worked day and night. They financed the excavations out of their own pocket. Each invested more than $10,000 and took out a bank loan. Finally, they noticed the first details of the ship. The shovels hit the huge engine boilers and the deck. The goal had been achieved. Most of the cargo lying inside the sunken ships is covered with rust, shells, mud, and is badly damaged. The contents of Arabia were in excellent condition, considering that the ship had sunk 130 years prior. Unfortunately, they didn't find the chests of gold. Still, they got several tons of other valuable cargo, household items of people who lived in the middle of the 19th century. It was a time capsule. The ship was carrying supplies for hundreds and thousands of people, and all these things were perfectly preserved. For example, they could clearly see the brand stamp Goodyear Rubber Company on one rubber shoe. The longer the excavations continued, the more things David and his team found. In the barrels, they found plates from the 19th century. They were intact and usable. Also, there were clean clothes, thousands of pairs of shoes, harpoons, frying pans, and umbrellas. The ship was carrying cargo to supply about 16 small towns. Yes, it's not gold, but such artifacts are also precious. The contents of the ship could be worth millions. However, the crew wasn't going to sell these things. They made a museum on the site of a former fruit market in Kansas City. If you go there, you will immediately feel like you're in a department store of the 19th century. There are thousands of items in good condition. Even the matches here are dry enough to light up. It took David many years to present the entire collection from the steamship. He values each of the items and doesn't want to sell them. Anyone can come here, pay for a ticket, and find themselves in the past. Who knows, maybe there's an old ship hidden in your backyard too. Geologists found an older vessel in the hot desert of Namibia in 2008. This ship sailed back in the days when pirates scared sailors on the seas, and now it's inside a dried-up lagoon. The ship sailed from Lisbon in 1533 and disappeared with the crew near a small diamond mining town. After almost 500 years, the hull had been badly damaged. Only the carcass of the ship remained, but the treasure hidden inside the vessel stayed intact. They carefully studied the boat for a long time, trying not to ruin anything. And then, 5 days later, they found a big old chest in the hold. Carefully opening it, they found gold coins there. Thus, the cost of the ship was estimated at about $10 million. The exact cause of the shipwreck is unknown, but experts believe the ship was destroyed by heavy cargo and bad weather. It went to the bottom of a lagoon that later became a desert. Some find an airplane in their backyard, others discover a ship, and one man found a passage to an ancient secret city in his house. This happened in Turkey in 1963. The owners of the building decided to make repairs. He went to his basement and knocked down the wall to turn this place into a living room. And so, behind one wall, he found a tunnel leading underground. The man thought it was some kind of a secret chamber. He went down there and realized it was something much more than that. It was an ancient city 18 floors deep. People built it in the years 780 to 1180 as a refuge from weather disasters and the invasion of enemies. This place also includes many underground tunnels that stretch for several miles in different directions. People could get to the town from different points using secret passages leading to these roads. The city can accommodate about 20,000 residents, livestock, and tons of food supplies. Archaeologists have also found a chapel, schools, stables, and public kitchens there. Are you afraid of the dark? There are some places where you don't want to be in. Deep inside the mines is already scary, but it's the stories behind it that make my skin crawl. The Ringwood Mine in New Jersey might sound like a typical mine for some people, But for others, it's a place that no one wants to go. It was once a thriving mine with one of the largest iron productions in the world. More than 100 years ago, in the early 1900s, people abandoned the mine, and it's still open for curious tourists to take a peek. During its heyday, thousands of workers would get up every day and prepare themselves to work in very dangerous conditions. The mine was prone to cave-ins and various accidents that happened regularly. People were getting underpaid even though they knew how dangerous it was to be there. Think less than a single dollar per day to get dirty and without sunlight for most of your day. But that's not the reason why people nowadays avoid it. It's because there were reports of paranormal activity down there. Some of the locals claimed they heard footsteps and voices originating from inside the mines years before it was abandoned. Some people saw figures walking around their homes while holding lanterns in their hands, something which was very common back in those days. Although people have claimed to hear these strange noises, there's no evidence to suggest that it was anything paranormal. Back in those days, between the 1800s and the early 1900s, there weren't any proper treatments or precautions for safety and health. People needed to work, and this was a quick way of earning money. No one ever thought about being down a mining shaft was scary or not. Imagine you're one of those workers who are about to finish your shift when the lantern above you starts to die out. You get some matches and try to ignite them, but no luck. After a while, you realize that it's just you down there, and everyone else has left. You pack up your gear and make your way out following the string of lights that were placed strategically so that no one gets lost down there. As you make your way through the narrow path, you start hearing voices coming from behind the walls. At first, you don't think much of it considering the reverberation of sounds within the mines. But then, you listen closely and realize that these sounds seem like they're literally coming from within the walls that are too thick to be heard from outside. You glue your ear to the walls and hear someone call your name. You jolt and run towards the mouth of the cave. However, the lights are flickering and the voices are getting louder and louder. The voices are jumbling together, creating an incoherent mix of weird gibberish and what appears to sound like someone chanting your name. Your heart is racing and you're sweating profusely. You don't really know where you're going since everything looks the same. Suddenly, you hear the sound of rumbling coming from the belly of the mine, and then silence. Everything is black. That's what it would feel like if you were a miner during those days. Back to the creepy stories. In West Riding, England, the name Oak's Pit strikes fear into the local community. The people of Barnsley remember that the mining site was one of the mining disasters in British history on December 12, 1866. The gases inside the mines ignited a fire, causing a major explosion. The fire spread and raged on for many days, destroying the mining equipment and wooden supports that were built. Finally, around 100 tons of coal collapsed into a crater at the mouth of the shaft, sealing it for good. However, very recently, people began to notice something strange. Quite recently, a team specialized in otherworldly phenomena decided to investigate the site to try and figure out what happened there. They got around to see if there was anything left that they could communicate with. In the end, the team concluded that this place was indeed freaky. There wasn't enough evidence to prove that the place was haunted. During the early 1900s, there was a silver rush in Alaska in the western part of the Wrangell Mountains. The Tonopah Mining District, which is now a museum, was part of a park that hosted plenty of buildings, such as a blacksmith shop and a hospital, among others. While there isn't any particular story like the previous ones, this mine is known to be haunted. There are plenty of theories behind it. Some say it's ancient spirits occupying the mines, while others say it's from the prospectors who used to work there. Either way, you can easily get a guided tour in and around the area, even at night if you're brave enough to go. Mining has always been a part of human history. The first metals to have ever been mined were gold and copper. Some scientists have found evidence of copper pipes to be more than 5,000 years old. Copper was necessary for the next stage of human advancement, as it helped us with technology for defending ourselves and trading. Ever heard of the term luck of the Irish? That's actually a mining term during the gold and silver rushes in Western America, when most of the luck was going to the Irish miners who were finding everything. In 1863, the Vulture mine in Arizona was thriving with gold, as if the name of the mine wasn't creepy enough. Up until 1946, it was producing millions of ores of gold, but in between, the mine closed for certain times. Many investigators decided to look around the mine to see if there was anything strange happening inside. According to them, they heard some noise coming from above when they were inside. The locals of the area later chased them out since they were trespassing. The Atlas coal mine opened and closed quickly between 1936 and 1979 in Alberta, Canada. The coal was mined to produce electricity and heating. The mine was known for having 2 shafts, both of which were connected by a tunnel at its base. The owners of the mines decided to build houses for their workers and their families, since they knew they were creating many jobs. They eventually built a school, a hospital, and a library. But in 1979, the mine closed due to an accident, and ever since then, the mining town was abandoned. Many people have reported seeing some lights inside the buildings, despite them being empty, as well as hearing weird noises from within the walls. Some remarkable things were discovered in mines, including the mighty Titan boa. This giant serpent was slithering around roughly 58 million years ago and was more than 40 feet in length, and weighed as much as a black rhino today. The coal miners in Colombia were digging out some coal when they discovered the fossil of this giant snake. Initially, they thought it was an anaconda, but it was much bigger than that. Imagine making that discovery. Now, imagine roaming through a mine and discovering antique European cars dating back to the 1930s. In 2016, a Belgian teacher was going through a French mine when he discovered the tunnels which led to the cars. It's believed that they were kept there as a secret stash, but no one claimed them back. Even though they're all rusty, their value certainly didn't drop. If you ever wanted to visit the world's largest freshwater dive resort, then we have the Bonne Terre in a lead mine in Missouri to thank for that. It was a fully functioning mine up until 1962 when it shut down. The company that was operating it pulled the plug, including the water pumps. Slowly, but surely, water began to rise and fill the mine, and by the 1970s, the 3 lowest levels were completely submerged. It then became known as the world's largest underground freshwater lake, and was named the Billion-Gallon Lake. Most of the mining equipment is still underwater, and there are dozens of miles to discover. Count me in.
One guy was walking in the forest of County Park in Huntington, New York. He came to a mysterious small area where he found cans of leftover food and a dirty blanket on the ground. Broken branches lay nearby, folded into a strange shape resembling a cage. And almost every tree had A4 sheets of paper hanging on it. There were about 10 sheets in total. Someone carelessly stuck them to the trunks with duct tape. All these sheets had photos of missing people and some information about their disappearance, a city where a person had vanished, and the local police phone number. The guy got scared and ran away, but before that, he filmed everything on his phone. He posted the video on the internet, and after that, Reddit users started their own investigation. It turned out all those people whose faces were printed on the posters were really missing. The man who discovered this place called the police. Fortunately, the officers quickly found the person who had done this. He threw a Halloween party and decided to hang posters of missing people to create a scary atmosphere. He removed all the photos, and the police stopped the investigation. Do you know these guys standing in the streets and holding a free hugs sign? Oh, it's so cute. They give so many positive vibes to people. And now, imagine you're walking through a dark forest alone, in the fog, and somewhere in the thicket, you notice a small gray house. It's hidden in the foliage, and looks like an entrance to a bunker. It has no windows, only a dark doorway leading into the darkness. And you see that someone wrote, "Free Hugs Hut" on the wall. Yeah, not so cute this time. The exact location of this hut is unknown, but it's somewhere in the forests of Wisconsin. In fact, there's nothing terrible inside. Some garbage, dry leaves, cobwebs, and moss. Teenagers or homeless people like to hang out in this hut. Some of them probably had a good sense of humor if they wrote this phrase on the wall. But imagine if a scary, pale old woman had been living there for years. She'd be waiting for you inside to hug you tightly with her long, thin arms. We're in Greenville, South Carolina. There's a forest next to this town. You go there and notice a silhouette of a man. It's a big, sinister clown. You freeze in fear. He's just standing there among the trees and looking at you, smiling. Your knees are shaking. You're sweating. The clown raises his hand and beckons you with his finger. You don't go, and the clown makes a sad grimace. Then he takes some money out of his pocket and shows it to you. You finally return control over your body and run away from the forest as fast as you can. The scariest thing is that there are several such clowns in the woods of Greenville. Many locals have seen them walking among trees, attracting people's attention with green laser pointers. Fortunately, instead of approaching them, residents went to the police station. The clowns called people to an abandoned house in the woods. Officers searched the building, but found nothing suspicious there. Still, locals prefer to avoid the forest. In forests, you can not only see, but also hear something terrible. For example, you can hear people's screams. These sounds come from nowhere and only at night. They can drive you mad if you don't know their nature. Coyotes live in forests all over North America, Canada, and Mexico. In the winter and spring, these animals howl and scream. Even if one coyote does it, it may seem that several of them have surrounded you. This illusion occurs because there are many different sounds in the forest. Birds, animals, the sound of falling rain, all this mixes with the coyotes howling, and it may seem to you that these animals are everywhere. Also, coyotes can change the tones of their voices and sound like people. Now let's forget about creepy things and find something beautiful in the woods. You're in a wide green clearing surrounded by a dense forest. You approach the thicket and see a hole in it. It's not a huge hollow, but a perfectly round passage. It looks like a portal to a magical land, and it's the creation of a famous Finnish artist named Antti Laitinen. He carefully cut the leaves and branches of the surrounding trees to create the perfect circle. He called it Broken Landscape. Besides this hole, the artist has many other unique works. He almost always deals with nature. He has created similar small circles resembling suns in the dense branches of leafless trees. You don't need to travel all over the world to see them. You can find photos of almost all of the artist's works on the internet. Let's move to the green forests of Scotland. Walking among trees and bushes, you can come across human figures. They stand motionless and faceless and reflect everything around them, quite literally. The famous Scottish sculptor Rob Mulholland made these statues out of plexiglass. This is a special kind of glass that reflects light like a mirror. 6 sculptures make up a large vestige installation. Each figure is in a different pose. They reflect trees, bushes, and grass, merging with the forest. In summer, when everything is blooming, the figures are beautiful. But in early spring or late autumn, they reflect nothing but grayness and lifelessness, which makes them look pretty creepy. The sculptor wanted to show a trace of people who lived in the forests many years ago, when humanity was more connected to nature. At that time, survival strongly depended on the state of forests and harvests, and these statues show this unity with the woods. There's a stunning forest in the south of Japan. There are no strange things there. It's weird by itself. If you look at the forest from a height, you'll see that the trees there grow in concentric circles. There are several of them. The closer to the center of this area, the closer the trees are standing to each other. In the outer row, the trees don't grow densely. The whole area resembles mysterious circular patterns in fields all over the world. But this is not a natural anomaly, but the result of human intervention. In 1973, people planted trees so that they created 10 concentric circles. The main idea of this experiment was to find out how cedars could grow in such circular conditions. The researchers called this place experimental forestry. Surprisingly, the trees began to grow in a convex shape, symmetrically fanning out. This proved that the size of the gaps between the trees greatly affected their growth. Initially, the scientists planned to cut the trees down after the experiment was over, but the place became very popular with tourists. People love to walk along these trails and take beautiful pictures using drones. The next strange finding is in the US. This is Vashon Highway, surrounded by a large forest. In its thicket, you can find an unusual tree with a rusty red bicycle inside its trunk. It looks like it grew into the trunk and became a part of it. Only the handlebars and one of the wheels stick out of the bark. The bike got into this tree in the 50s. One young guy received it as a present for his birthday, but he didn't like its handlebars and rugged wheels. So he just left this present near a bush and never came back for it. The bush turned out to be a young tree. With time, its trunk expanded and grew around the iron body of the bicycle. When locals noticed this, they decided not to remove the bike from the tree. And they did right, since this place became popular among tourists.
When you think of theme parks, you normally imagine laughter and fun times. But once they're closed and abandoned, now that's a whole different story. Let's take a look at some of them. You decide to take a trip to New Orleans to visit Six Flags. When you arrive there, you discover the theme park is deserted. The sign that says "Closed for Storm" is still standing. You're feeling adventurous, so you let yourself past the crackling gates. Is it chilly in here, or is it just me? You walk past a swimming pool, and it looks like there's someone in there. You get closer, and oh no, it's an alligator. Better run and leave that thing alone. You keep exploring the sign. The park took inspiration from the city's French architecture, but today the buildings are dirty, the windows are all shattered, and there are unusual items everywhere. Say, what is this vintage rollerblade doing here? The park closed during the hurricane, and it was left standing under 7 feet of water. No wonder the metal rides are all rusty now. This carousel doesn't look too inviting to me. We'll have to come back another time. Hey, at least you got some cool-looking pictures, right? Let's make this next one even more exciting. Imagine you plan to visit Dede Park at night. Somewhere in the countryside of Belgium, you'll find a creepy theme park derelict from many years ago. You have nothing with you but the floodlight on your phone. You see the entrance of a bridge and start to make your way across. The bridge sways and creaks. Just FYI, you are crossing one of the longest hanging bridges in Europe. You made it through. Whew. The surrounding woods are terrifying, and several deserted attractions start popping up along the way. The forest has taken this twirling swing set. This huge slide would probably break if you tried to use it now. The park is in terrible condition. No wonder they closed it down due to security reasons. Best to leave it now and come back in the daylight. Your next stop is Wonderland Eurasia, also known as Anka Park in Turkey. The theme park opened in March 2019 but closed shortly after. Once inside the gigantic complex, you stumble upon what looks like an empty warehouse but ends up being an indoor roller coaster. Everything was left intact and is as good as new. You even take a quick sit on one of the roller coaster carts, perfectly lined up for the next ride. If you're feeling really adventurous, you can walk on the rails of the indoor coaster. Just be careful not to fall down. Oh, over there are the Flintstones. It's almost like a childhood deja vu here in the youngsters section of the park. On the horizon, you see what looks like the Jurassic World and decide to check it out. There are neglected statues of huge T-Rexes and fake skeletons of dinosaurs lying across the floor. Unlike the other derelict parks, everything here is new, which makes it all the more strange. Nara Dreamland was meant to be Japan's Disney World, but the project failed over time. Today, it's inhabited by moist ivies and strange birds. To get in, you'll pass a drawbridge and head into a pastel-colored castle. Your heart might beat faster than usual when you pass a fog-covered roller coaster. Was that meant to be the Matterhorn? Yup. Everything about this place says you shouldn't be there. Tossed on the park's floor, you'll see reels of tickets and misconfigured stuffed animals. How about walking into an empty diner? It's bizarre how the tables and stools are still in place. Strolling through what was once a gift shop, you'll see empty shelves and an old-school cash machine. I'd say you better leave before anything comes out of here. Now, if I say Joyland, what do you imagine? The name says it all, right? But if you decide to visit Joyland today, I bet you'll have a very chilling time. Down in Wichita, Kansas, you'll find a once famous but now empty theme park filled with eerie sights. A pale blue slide in the middle of a forest? Check. Empty warehouses straight out of a horror movie? Check. A wacky shack that looks truly wacky? You bet. But if you visit it on a good sunny day, I'd say the park is weird but still has some beauty. Joyland was built in the late 1940s. It carries a vintage aura that goes well with the neglected atmosphere. Hey, look at this rusty yellow Ferris wheel with a stripped ticket box in front. I dare say it's almost charming. The Magic Harbor Amusement Park is not that magical after all. Just outside of Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, you'll find an old theme park left to nature. Here, bumper cars are not bumping anymore. If you get into a hedge maze, you'll probably never find your way out of it. I'm not sure what you'll see running around amongst the rusty rides, so good luck if you're planning a visit. If you're looking for somewhere to cool down on a hot and sunny afternoon, how about Disney's River Country? Just kidding. You're definitely not going to want to get in the water there. The park was built in the 1970s and closed in 2001. Pay a visit to the Whitewater Rapids on foot instead of floating down the fake river. You'll have about 330 feet to stroll along a very bumpy pathway. Maybe you'll see hanging tires that served as swing sets out in the bay. You can even try zip lining if you trust the cable. To add a little more creepy to this story, the park was closed down due to a dangerous bacteria that thrived in warm bodies of water. Are you sure you don't fancy a swim? When you think Italy, I bet you think pasta and pizza, and a leaning tower somewhere. Well, in the south of Italy sits the empty Miragica amusement park. The entrance still says welcome, but people stopped coming a few years ago. The site is covered in grass everywhere. The toy-like architecture is still there. Beneath the forgotten rails of an open-air roller coaster, you can almost hear the screams of excitement of people on the ride. This part of the park is usually prohibited, but there's no one around to control that now. It might be scary to be here, but adrenaline sure is running high. This next theme park is vacant only during a certain time of the year, but it still gives the true heebie-jeebie vibes. You have to catch a train from the city and travel to the end of the line till you reach the park. Coney Island is a seasonal park, open only from the middle of spring to the middle of fall. If you want to catch its unnerving vibe, you have to visit in winter. Then, you'd walk through the rows of empty stalls with the fairy string lights still hanging above your head. It looks frozen in time as all the rides lay shut down. Speaking of which, sometimes it gets frozen for real. Under many inches of snow, Coney Island is a little less disturbing. Then again, snow does have that effect on landscapes, but the park is empty and deserted nonetheless. I bet it's a great photo op. Now, Be sure to tell me in the comments which abandoned amusement park you found the creepiest. Hey, you know me, I won't be checking any of these out. I'll let you go first.
Have you ever wondered why mountains seem so still and silent? Well, prepare to be amazed because these majestic landforms have some hidden talents. You see, mountains are actually quite the performers. They have their own unique songs and dance routines. What does it mean and how does it work? Well, let's see. Get ready for a chilling revelation. Mount Everest has a secret nighttime symphony, and this mysterious music will send shivers down your spine. When darkness falls over the Himalayas, a strange, eerie chorus echoes through the glaciers surrounding the majestic peak. A team of researchers embarked on a quest to unravel the mystery. Led by the glaciologist Evgeny Podolsky, they trekked through the freezing temperatures of the Nepalese Himalayas. Their goal? To uncover the source of these hair-raising noises. The team was amazed by the incredible size and beauty of Mount Everest. During the day, the weather was nice and they could work comfortably. However, when night came, it became extremely cold, reaching temperatures as low as -5 degrees Fahrenheit. At that moment, something interesting happened. The ice on the mountain started to break apart and make loud booming sounds that echoed through the valley. To solve the mystery, the team used advanced technology that is typically used to measure earthquakes. They placed sensors on the surface of the glacier and listened to the vibrations it created. They also looked at information about temperature and wind. By comparing all of this data, they made a very important and exciting discovery. The culprit behind this frozen orchestra? It's the sudden decrease in temperature. The icy surface of the glacier is very sensitive to these changes, causing it to crack and split with loud booming noises. This discovery helps scientists understand how glaciers behave in a world where climate change is becoming more pronounced. This adventure is really important because it gives scientists who study glaciers and the climate in faraway places like the Himalayas very valuable information. The melting of glaciers in that area is happening really fast, and that's a big problem. It's a serious threat to South Asia. Recent research shows that the glaciers have been melting 10 times faster in the past 40 years compared to the previous 700 years. But this isn't the only reason why mountains can make strange noises. Other mountains might also sing their own songs. For example, Mount Matterhorn. Guess what? Everything around us has its own special rhythm. Objects vibrate at certain frequencies because of their shape and what they're made of. You've probably seen it before with tuning forks and wine glasses. When they're hit with the right frequency, they start shaking and making sounds. But here's something cool. Even mountains have their own groove. They vibrate in their own unique way. Jeffrey Moore and his team of adventurous scientists wanted to find out if mountains can dance to their own music, just like bridges and tall buildings. They thought that the special shapes of mountains might make them vibrate at certain frequencies, which is called resonance. But testing this idea wasn't easy. Unlike buildings that engineers can shake or bridges that vehicles can drive over, mountains are massive and hard. It's hard to make them move on purpose. Not giving up, Moore and his team took on a big project. They wanted to study how the shaking of the earth affected the famous Matterhorn mountain. This incredible mountain is located on the border of Italy and Switzerland. It looks like a pyramid. It's really tall, reaching about 15,000 feet high. It has 4 sides facing north, south, east, and west. With the help of helicopters, the scientists put special devices called seismometers in specific places on the mountain. One was placed at the very top and used solar power to work. It was as small as a coffee cup. Another seismometer was tucked beneath the floorboards of a cozy hut on the mountain, and a third one was placed at the base of the mountain to compare the measurements. Together, they were the tiny observers that kept recording the movements of the mountain all the time. And they finally detected it. Even though the mountain's movements are incredibly small, scientists discovered that the Matterhorn gently sways back and forth about once every 2 seconds. What's truly surprising is that the top of the mountain moves up to 14 times more than its base. The Eiffel Tower kinda does the same thing. This giant iron structure is a pro at handling windy days, and when a storm blows through, it's not afraid to show off its swaying skills. It's like the tower is saying, "Hey wind, bring it on." But the reason behind the mountain's movement isn't just wind, as it may seem. So, why do mountains do that? Why do they dance and make a humming sound? Are they having a party that we're not invited to? Well, it's all because of something called seismic energy. When earthquakes happen in different parts of the world, their energy travels through the earth and causes the mountains to vibrate. The oceans also join in this mountain music. When waves move across the ocean floor, they create vibrations called microseisms. It's like the Earth's own heartbeat, felt all around the world. And guess what? The frequency of these vibrations matches the way the Matterhorn sways. It's like the mountain and the oceans are chilling together. So the next time you see a mountain, remember that it's not just standing still. It's actually part of a global symphony created by the Earth itself. This research helps us learn how earthquakes can affect steep mountains that are prone to landslides and avalanches. It also gives us a new way to appreciate mountains like the Matterhorn. They have their own hidden songs, swaying and vibrating to a mysterious melody deep within the earth. But there's one more pretty cool thing about the mountains. They don't just talk themselves. They may also influence the way we talk. Turns out, languages spoken in high-altitude areas have special sounds that you won't hear elsewhere. After studying 567 languages, linguists found that 92 of them use a special kind of sound called ejectives. These sounds are made by pushing air out forcefully from the back of the throat. This creates bursts of speech that give these languages their distinctiveness. Scientists were really surprised by this connection. These sounds, like a strong K and Ka, are not common in English or European languages. But some indigenous languages in North America and the area between the Black Sea and the Caspian Sea have them. What's even more puzzling is that Tibetan languages, spoken in mountains, don't use ejectives. Linguists are curious to unravel this mystery and learn more about how mountains and language are connected. So, why do some languages spoken in the mountains have special sounds? Well, it's a bit of a mystery. Researchers have some cool ideas. One idea is that these sounds might help people keep their throats from getting dry when they talk in the dry air of the mountains. Another idea is that the lower air pressure up there makes it easier to make these sounds, but scientists are still figuring out the real reason. Although some experts are not entirely convinced by this explanation. They say that while geography can influence language, there are other reasons why languages might be similar, like borrowing words from nearby languages or being close to each other. But this research has still given us some amazing insights. Mountains not only shape the way our world looks, but they also shape the way we talk. So, the next time you're exploring a mountainous area, listen carefully to the local language. You might hear unique sounds and words that are influenced by the mountains themselves. It's like nature is sharing its own special secrets through the language of the people who live there. And remember that the mountains themselves also have a voice, and they're speaking to us in their own special way. Scientists are still on an exciting adventure to uncover their secrets. So let's see what are some cool things they'll find out in the future. Stay tuned.
How do you imagine it is to work as a lighthouse keeper? Probably like an introvert's dream. You're alone on a rock in the middle of the sea with nothing but the raging waves and the lights to keep you company. But being alone can have its downside too. No one will know if something happens to you. And that was exactly the case with the keepers of the Flannan Isles Lighthouse. It was a fine and calm day on December 15th, 1900. In such weather conditions, lighthouses aren't crucial for the safety of passing ships, but it was still noted as a bit odd by the Arctur, a steamer passing by the Flannan Isles on its way to Philadelphia, that the lighthouse on Eilean Mor was not operational. The ship's captain noted it in his log and left it at that. It was only 3 days later, when the Arctur arrived to the port of Leith, that the strangeness was officially reported. A ship was immediately rigged with a relief lighthouse keeper, Joseph Moore, to be delivered to Eilean Mor. But the weather had been bad since the day before, and it couldn't set sail for more than a week. Finally, on December 26th, the relief boat Hesperus arrived at the lighthouse. But even as they approached, they could tell it's not been maintained this whole time. The lighthouse had normally been manned by 3 people: James Ducat and Thomas Marshall, the regular keepers, and Donald MacArthur, the occasional who has been substituting for another keeper on sick leave. There was a 4th too, a rotating man who was on store at the time. The Hesperus crew, however, was met by no one. Normally, at least one of them would have been waiting for the ship on the dock. That was the first sign of trouble, but by far not the last. Upon arrival, James Harvey, captain of the ship, also noticed that there was no signal flag on the flagstaff to welcome the relief boat, and all the supply crates had been left on the landing while they should have been inside. Harvey blew the ship's whistle. No reaction. A flare was fired in the air. No effect either. The sense of unease grew on the Hesperus, so Moore decided to deploy a boat and go on shore alone to investigate. It was ominously quiet on the island. The lighthouse stood dark and lifeless, only seagulls keeping it company. Moore went on to explore the territory and the building itself, and what he found unsettled him even further. There was no sign of the keepers, not even a trace left. Both the main gate and the entrance door to the lighthouse were closed. The beds were unmade, and most eerily, the clock stopped. That meant the men were absent for more than a week. Pensive and alarmed, Moore returned to the ship and took 3 volunteers back to shore to further investigate. Inside the lighthouse, they saw other signs the keepers left in a hurry. There was an overturned chair near the dinner table, and 2 of the 3 protective oilskin coats were missing. The 3rd was still on the hook, which was very strange. The weather during the past week was terrible, so why would one of the men leave the building without protection? And in any case, the rules dictated that there should always be at least 1 keeper on the post tending to the lighthouse. For all 3 of them to leave at once, something terrible must have happened. When the men returned to the Hesperus, Captain Harvey used a telegraph to send a note to the Northern Lighthouse Board. It said that a dreadful accident had happened at the Flannans and that all the keepers had disappeared. His guess was that the poor souls had been swept away by the raging sea or had fallen from a cliff. Harvey's requested an official investigation to be conducted, and on December 29th, Robert Muirhead, a Northern Lighthouse Board superintendent, arrived to do just that. And here's where things truly took a turn for the eerie. Muirhead found the lighthouse logbook that the men kept until their disappearance, that is, about dinner time of December 15th. On December 12th, Thomas Marshall wrote that there were severe winds the likes of which he'd never seen in 20 years. Also, the 2 other men began acting in a highly unusual way. Ducat, according to the logbook, was very quiet, and MacArthur was crying. Highly unusual in this instance was a huge understatement. All 3 of the keepers were tough, hardened men, and MacArthur was a veteran mariner. It was simply impossible that he could have been crying because of the storm, no matter how bad it was. The entry from December 13th told that the winds were still howling, and the sea was even more violent than the day before. The log implied that the 3 men were terrified, which was, again, very strange since they were experienced keepers and knew that they were safe inside the lighthouse. The elements could do nothing against a sturdy stone structure built specifically to withstand rough weather conditions like these. But perhaps the most unsettling of this was the fact that there were actually no storms cited on the 12th, 13th, or 14th of December in that area. It was written in the log that the skies finally cleared only on the morning of December 15th. And that was the last entry. The keepers went missing, on the evening of the same day. There are so many inconsistencies in this whole story that it remains a mystery to this day. Not only did the official investigation not find any clear evidence of what had happened in the Eileen Moore Lighthouse, but it also made the situation even more perplexing. As soon as the news reached the mainland, wild theories from all corners of the UK started circulating. Still, there was also at least the official version of events, and that made some sense. You see, the western landing of the lighthouse premises was severely damaged by recent storms. Iron railings were bent, the iron railway beside the path was torn out of concrete, and turf had been ripped away from the top of a cliff that stood 200 feet tall. This evidence showed that the waves and the wind had been particularly savage. And there lay the explanation to the mysterious vanishing of the keepers. On the 15th of December, 2 of the men must have gone out into the storm to secure the box on the western landing, which contained mooring ropes. They had been out for some time when the third one, left inside as the rules required, noticed an abnormally large wave coming down on the island fast. Deciding there was no time to waste, he leaped to his feet, overturning the chair he had been sitting on, and rushed off to warn the other 2 of the imminent danger. He was in a big hurry, so he didn't stop to grab the oilskin coat on the way out. But apparently, he was too late. When he reached his fellow keepers, the wave had already reached the island, and as they were all dangerously close to the edge, it swept them all from the landing. Seems a plausible enough theory, but there are a couple of gaps in it. Firstly, it doesn't explain where the storm even came from. The keepers disappeared in the evening of December 15th, and by all accounts, the weather that day was fine, and the sea was calm. Even the keeper's own logbook confirmed it. So, how would a huge wave appear on that day without any warning? And secondly, again according to the entries in the Lighthouse logbook, the damage to the western landing had been done before the men's disappearance. So, they must have witnessed the mayhem, but had not in fact gone out into it. Since 1900, many more theories have been born, including one about a freak wave washing away one of the men and the others being swept away by subsequent waves while helping him. Also, some theorized that a big wave might have entered a narrow gully by the western landing and burst back with force, pushing the men who were trying to secure their equipment over the edge. In this theory, the third keeper was also running to help his colleagues, but suffered the same fate as them. But whatever hypotheses were given, credible or nonsensical, none of them have given us any clue as to what really happened to the 3 bold men from Eileen Moore. Who knows? Maybe someday the truth will be discovered? What do you think caused the lighthouse keepers to disappear from the island? Let me know down in the comments. If you learned something new today, then give this video a like and share it with a friend.
There's one beautiful mountain in the southern part of Tibet called Kailash. Its height is about 22,000 feet. This is not so high and much less than Mount Everest. But unlike Everest, almost no one has ever climbed Kailash for one unusual reason. In 1926, one famous British climber decided to get to the mountain's top and studied it for a long time. The Mountaineering Association informed him that the mountain was completely inaccessible. Despite this, he continued trying. While exploring its northern part, it started snowing at that moment. It was impossible to work in such conditions, so he gave up this idea and left. The next attempt to climb to the top of Kailash was made by another climber, Colonel Wilson. Together with his companion, they figured out the most suitable passage to the top. They were confident they would achieve their goal, but the harsh winter ruined their plan. The colonel wanted to come back again, but he never did. Another person who wanted to climb to the top was an Australian writer and climber. He explored the territory of the Tibetan mountains and saw Kailash. At that moment, he thought he would easily reach the peak. He met one local lama and asked him if it was possible to climb Kailash. Lama replied that only an innocent person free from any sin can get there. And this person didn't even need to climb the icy walls, as he would be able to fly up there like a bird. The writer didn't really understand what the llama meant, but for some reason, abandoned his idea. Then in the 80s, the Mountaineering Association again considered the issue of Mount Kailash. They decided to allow conquering the peak to Reinhold Messner, an Italian researcher who was one of the first to make a solo ascent of Everest. When he heard the offer to climb Kailash, he refused to conduct an expedition. He said, "If we conquer this mountain, then we conquer something in people's souls." The climber knew that this mountain was a sacred place for local Tibetans. Pilgrims from all over the world came to its foot. Reinhold Messner knew this and didn't want to do something that could offend other people. No one is allowed to climb to the top of this mountain, but you can go to its foot to feel the energy and enjoy the beautiful view. Put a photo of the Rainbow Mountains and a canvas with a painted landscape next. It will be difficult to distinguish the drawing from reality. These mountains look like paintings. This is a real art of nature. Rainbow Mountains, located in one of the geological parks of China, shimmer with almost all the colors of the rainbow. The rocks seem to be covered with glass and reflect sunlight. This place got these colors thanks to the sandstone and minerals. These substances have been pressed for 25 million years and have made Rainbow Mountains one of the most beautiful places on Earth. We are in the Philippines. There are more than 1,000 unusual hills spread over a vast area. No, this is not a photo of chocolates. This is chocolate hills. They're small. The height of the largest reaches about 400 feet. You can quickly climb to the top in a few minutes. The peculiarity of these hills is that hundreds of thousands of people daily sprinkle these peaks with millions of tons of chocolate chips. And then, when it melts, the incredible smell of cocoa spreads throughout the territory. Okay, just kidding. Of course it's not chocolate chips. Every hill is covered with green grass. During the dry season, it dries out and gets a chocolate brown hue. This landscape is just a great photo for a package of sweets. Perhaps some company has already printed it on its box. Imagine a small mountain, about 33 feet high and 330 feet wide. It's not even a mountain, but a small hill. Nothing grows on it. No grass, no trees, just dark sand. But the peculiarity of this mountain is that it can move. Every year, it passes a distance of about 66 feet. Look at it, remember its position, and come back in 12 months. It will change the location, but also change its shape. Moving Mountain is located in the savanna of Tanzania. This massive dune has been moving in different directions for 3 million years. In fact, it doesn't consist of sand, but of magnetized volcanic ash. Once upon a time, a volcano erupted here. The settled ash formed these hills. If you take a handful of this ash and throw it into the air, it will be attracted to the total mass of the dune. A strong wind makes them move, but magnetic forces keep the sand together. One day, the mountain split into two parts and went in different directions. One of the most mysterious and strange mountains is located in North Carolina. This is Mount Brown. Externally, you won't find anything special in it, but try to take a tent and spend a couple nights there. Perhaps you will remember these nights for the rest of your life. People have often seen mysterious lights flying around this mountain. These strange fireballs fly high speeds over the top and disappear into the evening sky. Sometimes they disappear, appear, and disappear again. At first, people thought this was the result of ignited evaporating nitrogen, but this theory was refuted. Then, someone said that the balls were the light from the locomotive's headlights, but after the railway was flooded and the train stopped working, people continued to see the lights. There were reports of white, yellow, orange, and blue lights. Many are sure that they are optical illusions. One physics professor decided to check the validity of this version. He spent several years in this region, next to the mountain. Almost every day he filmed the rock, and one day he managed to catch these strange objects. In July 2016, he recorded Brown Mountain with 2 cameras from different angles, and both filmed a flying fireball. If it were an optical illusion or glare on lenses, then one of the cameras wouldn't have captured this phenomenon. This proves that the balls are real, but their nature is still unknown. One of the men claimed he had touched the flying ball when it was flying on the highway. The man said he felt an electric current. Now this place attracts thousands of tourists from all over the world. Fans of strange and unexplained phenomena like to come here. This mountain looks pretty scary and lifeless. It's located on a small volcanic island in the Tasman Sea, Australia. The island is called Ball's Pyramid. The sharp mountain range on this land has a triangular shape and a height of 1,800 feet. This is almost twice the size of the Eiffel Tower. It seems like some evil mad scientist or vampire lives on the top. Being on the island and climbing the cliff is dangerous because of the slippery, rocky surface. Sailors discovered this place in 1788. They thought the island was uninhabited and didn't want to explore it. Then, after more than 200 years, people still wanted to explore it. This place was considered lifeless for a long time, but scientists found unusual inhabitants there in 2001. They were climbing the mountain and found a strange bush at the height of about 100 feet. Something was stirring inside it. Scientists pushed aside the branches and saw a colony of big insects, land lobsters or walking sausages. These little guys are from the family of stick insects. They do look like sausages. Each of them is about 6 inches and has 6 tenacious paws and has a solid brown shell. On that day, scientists saw 27 insects. The most exciting thing is that people believed land lobsters were extinct at the beginning of the 20th century. How did they end up on this mountain? And how did they manage to survive in this remote, lifeless place? No one knows.
It used to be one of the most prosperous ancient cities. It had features that were unthinkable for other locations during the Bronze Age, like water systems and intricate architecture. Yet somehow, it didn't become famous. What's even more mysterious is that at some point, it became abandoned. Mohenjo-Daro was a thriving city during the Indus Valley civilization in the Bronze Age. It had a population of at least 40,000 people. It was close to Mesopotamia and Egypt in terms of social, cultural, and economic features. Despite this, it's lesser known than the more famous cities in these regions, like Babylon or Memphis. It was eventually abandoned by 1700 BCE, and the reason for its abandonment and the fate of its inhabitants remains unknown to this day. In 1911, archaeologists discovered the ancient city of Mohenjo-Daro after hearing reports of some unusual buildings in the area. However, local Indian authorities dismissed them as not having any historical significance, and the site remained untouched for several more years. It wasn't until 1922 that a local specialist believed he had found a buried local monument at the site. This led to large-scale excavations and the eventual naming of Mohenjo-Daro as a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 1980. The remains uncovered showed us that Mohenjo-Daro was an incredibly modern city for that time. It is considered the best preserved ruin of the Indus Valley. One of Mohenjo-Daro's most impressive features was its advanced sanitation system. Unlike in Egypt and Mesopotamia, where such appliances were only for the rich, Mohenjo-Daro had hidden toilets and covered drains throughout the city. Excavations have uncovered over 700 wells, as well as private baths and a large communal bath. Remarkably, even private homes had toilets, and waste was efficiently disposed of through a city-wide sewage system. The people of Mohenjo-Daro were highly aware of their surroundings. As the city was located near the Indus River, they built a strong defense against floods by using clever drainage systems. Over the centuries, they produced beautifully crafted pottery, jewelry, figurines, and other items that were traded as far as Mesopotamia and present-day Oman. Archaeologists have observed the use of standardized building materials in this ancient city, even though they didn't have the necessary machines back in the day. Interestingly, all the bricks were nearly the same. This shows great attention to detail in the city's design, as using consistent bricks creates an elegant look in the spaces within the city. People living in this area used the Indus Valley script to communicate with each other. This mysterious alphabet might be the key to unlocking more secrets from Mohenjo-Daro. It was a language that used symbols instead of letters and had over 400 signs. Problem is, we're still trying to figure it out. The mystery of what caused the end of the Indus civilization and Mohenjo-Daro remains unsolved. Some archaeologists suggest that the Indus River might have changed its direction. This could have led to problems in cultivating food if there was suddenly too much water in the city. However, there is no evidence that flooding destroyed the area, or that it was completely abandoned at once. A change in the river's course couldn't have been enough for the entire Indus civilization to disappear. Mohenjo-Daro isn't the only lost town from Eastern civilizations. Ross Island, for instance, was once known as the Paris of the East due to its stunning architecture and gardens. However, the island is now a shadow of its former self, with the buildings being largely overtaken by tree roots and vines. Located 1.8 miles off the coast of Port Blair, India, the small territory was initially used as a jail, but later became a luxurious resort for its administrators. After the complex was closed in 1937, an earthquake further damaged the island and it became uninhabitable. Today, the island is managed by the Indian government and attracts tourists interested in exploring abandoned towns. Another lost city tells the story of why Kolmanskop, a ghost town located in Namibia, is still home to remnants of German architecture. Once a luxury destination in the early 1900s, it was settled by German workers looking for diamonds. The city boasted amenities such as a ballroom, a hospital, and even a bowling alley. However, its popularity began to wane in the late 1910s when another diamond-rich location was discovered nearby. Most of the inhabitants left in search of better fortunes, leaving the buildings behind. The hot climate and low humidity have preserved the structures over time, and tourists can now visit this desert ghost town from the nearby town of Lüderitz. Hashima Island is a reminder of how nature reclaims its land when humans leave. It was famously featured in a James Bond movie due to its eerie atmosphere. The island was initially opened in 1881 for undersea coal mining, and the population of the island grew to a peak of 5,000 people in 1959. Unfortunately, the mines closed in the 1970s, and people began to slowly leave the island, resulting in complete abandonment in a period of 3 months. Now, the island is a popular tourist destination as visitors explore deserted homes, swimming pools, stores, and factories. The discovery of gold in a creek near Bannack, Montana in 1862 caused the population of the town to grow from a few hundred to thousands in a few short years. Unfortunately, this rapid expansion was followed by a sharp decline because more gold had been found in other areas nearby. As a result, Bannack was eventually made the first territorial capital of Montana, but only held the title for less than a year before being replaced by Virginia City. The state of Montana later acquired most of the land in 1954 and made it Bannack State Park. The ancient city of Petra, located in Jordan, was fascinating because it was half built, half carved into the rock and surrounded by mountains. It's a popular tourist destination these days, but at one point it was abandoned too. Many things led to its decline, like bad government and changes in how people traded. Natural disasters didn't help either. This city saw a lot of earthquakes ruining its constructions and damaging its water systems. Since people had no place to live, no water, and nothing to sell to make money, they eventually moved on to better locations. The city remained hidden for almost 500 years until it was rediscovered in the 1800s. Most of the tourists going to Santorini have no idea that the island is home to the remains of one of the largest volcanic eruptions in human history, the Thera eruption. This catastrophic event took place some 3,600 years ago. Akrotiri, one of the towns on the island at the time, was buried under the eruption. Unlike Pompeii, however, no traces of people and civilization were found, suggesting that people had enough time to flee the volcano before it blew up. Henry Ford, the renowned American industrialist, created the Ford Motor Company in 1903. In 1927, he began working on a grand project, Fordlandia. His goal was to construct a massive rubber plantation near the Tapajos River in Brazil to provide a steady supply of rubber for his car tires and hoses. His idea was to make the town a paradise, with swimming pools, golf courses, bungalows, and even weekly square dancing sessions. Unfortunately, the trees in the plantation soon became infected with leaf fungus, making the project a failure. Ford invested a whopping $20 million in this endeavor, yet it was unable to produce the necessary rubber. So Ford sold the land to the Brazilian government in 1945. The buildings that were built are still there, although they have been taken over by nature and are visited by tourists. Sky City is a residential area located in the Asian Hangzhou suburbs. It was built in 2007 and was intended to be a replica of Paris. The city even has its own Eiffel Tower, as well as copies of other iconic Parisian landmarks like the Opera Garnier and the Champs-Élysées. It also has luxurious villas and apartments, a man-made lake, gardens, and parks. Despite its grand plans, it's almost completely abandoned. Nobody wants to live here because it's really expensive. It is, however, a pretty nice location for locals to take pictures, in case they want to trick people into thinking that they just landed in the French capital.